Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Brian was always known among friends as the husband who defended his wife with claws and teeth, a characteristic that became almost a trademark of his during social gatherings and casual conversations at the office. For 15 years of marriage with Melissa, he never found a single reason to suspect her or question her fidelity, building absolute trust that his colleagues often envied. While other men at the office complained constantly about wives who hid their phones, answered suspicious calls locked in the bathroom, changed social media passwords without plausible explanation or showed evasive behavior when questioned about their whereabouts, Brian proudly stated that Melissa was different from all these women, as transparent as crystal clear water and incapable of any dishonesty or deception. She was always affectionate, attentive and present in all important moments of their lives together, showing an apparently genuine love that never left room for suspicion or distrust from the devoted husband. It was the ideal wife who woke up early to prepare breakfast on important days, supported him unconditionally in his most risky professional decisions and showed genuine love in every small daily gesture, from affectionate notes on the fridge to relaxing massages after stressful workdays. When Brian shared with Melissa the paranoia and suspicions of his colleagues about possible marital infidelities, she simply smiled with that sweet and characteristic way that he knew so well, saying that they were typical male nonsense, that men always found reasons to suspect their wives without any real foundation or concrete evidence. Melissa had a particular way of reassuring Brian about these issues, always with a soft and convincing tone that made him feel lucky to have a wife so different from others, so honest and transparent in all aspects of her personal and professional life. During these intimate conversation moments, she often commented on how she found it pathetic to see couples destroyed by unfounded jealousy and unnecessary suspicions, always positioning herself as someone who would never be capable of betraying the trust of her beloved husband. Brian's professional routine as a senior technology information specialist often kept him working late into the night at the office, especially during critical periods of implementation of complex systems or security updates that could not present any failure or instability. His company, a respected financial sector multinational, completely depended on technological stability and reliability to maintain its operations functioning without interruptions that could cause losses to customers or the company's reputation. On that specific Tuesday in October, Brian had informed Melissa in the morning, during the breakfast she had prepared with special care, that he would need to work throughout the night to homologate an extremely important and sensitive banking system that would go into production the following week, representing months of development and significant investment by the company. It was an ambitious technological project that had been developed for over 8 months by an international team of specialized programmers, and any failure or instability during the implementation could cause millions of dollars in losses for the company and its thousands of customers who depended on online banking services. The pressure on Brian was immense, considering that he was the final technical responsible for validating and approving the system before its definitive implementation. Around 7 o'clock in the evening, following his established routine for years, Brian called home to inform Melissa when he would be working late, a courtesy he always maintained so she wouldn't worry about his prolonged absence. Melissa answered the phone with her warm and loving voice as always, showing the genuine concern that always characterized their relationship over 15 years of happy and apparently stable marriage. She asked affectionately if he had managed to eat something substantial, if he needed her to prepare a special snack and bring it to the office to ensure he ate properly during the long night of work that awaited him. This constant attention to Brian's well-being was one of Melissa's most striking characteristics, demonstrating a care that he interpreted as irrefutable proof of the genuine love she felt for him. Brian replied that everything was under control, that he had ordered food from the restaurant near the office, and she responded with her usual sweetness that she loved him very much and sincerely wished him good luck with the complex and responsible work he needed to do during the night. Later, around 10 o'clock, while Brian was completely immersed in complex codes, detailed test spreadsheets and meticulous security checks of the system, Melissa sent a loving message wishing a peaceful night and informing that she would go to sleep relatively early because she was feeling particularly tired after a long and exhausting day at work in her own company, where she held a coordination position that often left her mentally exhausted. Brian quickly replied with several heart emojis and the affectionate phrase, "Good night, my love," before returning completely his attention and concentration to the critical systems he needed to validate meticulously before dawn. However, around 10:30, when Brian expected to finally start the most intense phase of the scheduled tests, the programming team responsible for the system development found an unexpected series of critical bugs and security flaws that made it completely impossible to continue with the homologation procedure scheduled for that specific night. The developers, after several hours of technical analysis and emergency correction attempts, informed with regret that they would need at least 12 additional hours of concentrated work to identify, correct, and test all the problems that had been discovered at the last minute. Frustrated and irritated after several hours of completely unproductive waiting, without any prospect of being able to advance with his work until the bugs were definitively resolved by the development team, Brian decided to go home around 11 o'clock. Planning to resume all homologation work the next morning once the team managed to resolve all pending issues and deliver a stable and reliable version of the system. During the drive from the company to his residence, a route he knew by heart after years of repetition, Brian thought mentally about how Melissa would be pleasantly surprised and happy to see him coming home earlier than expected, considering that she had prepared psychologically for the entire night alone while he worked. Upon arriving home and entering silently through the front door to not wake Melissa if she was already asleep, Brian found the whole house plunged into complete darkness and absolute silence. Melissa always had the kind and considerate habit of leaving at least the soft light of the corridor or the kitchen on when she knew Brian would arrive late from work, a kind gesture that she maintained religiously for many years so he wouldn't have to navigate the house completely in the dark and risk tripping over some furniture or object during the night. Feeling an initial pang of concern mixed with increasing curiosity about Melissa's unexpected absence, Brian headed directly to the couple's bedroom, expecting to find Melissa sleeping peacefully in bed. However, to his complete surprise and growing unease, he found the bed completely empty and perfectly made, exactly as Melissa left it every morning after her meticulous arrangement that was part of her daily routine. The decorative pillows were positioned with precision, the duvet was stretched without a single wrinkle, and there was no visible sign that anyone had used the room during the entire night, a discovery that made Brian feel an uncomfortable tightness in his stomach. A strange and undefined feeling began to take over Brian, a complex mix of genuine concern and something deeper and disturbing that he couldn't identify or name precisely at that moment of mental confusion. Initially, his rational mind tried to find logical and innocent explanations for the unexpected absence of Melissa, thinking that maybe she had gone out at the last minute for an unplanned family emergency or to help a close friend who was going through some kind of crisis or emotional situation, situations that had happened sporadically a few times over the 15 years of marriage. However, the more Brian reflected on the situation, the stranger it seemed that Melissa hadn't mentioned anything at all about any kind of commitment, outing, or activity planned during the phone call at 7 in the evening or in the affectionate message she had sent around 10 o'clock. Melissa had always been extremely communicative and transparent about all her plans and activities, especially when it involved leaving the house during unusual hours or during the night, a personality trait that Brian had always admired and interpreted as another proof of the honesty and transparency that defined his beloved wife's character. He sat down on the comfortable sofa in the living room, trying to mentally process the unexpected situation and deciding internally whether he should immediately call Melissa and ask directly about her whereabouts or if he should wait a little longer, giving her the benefit of the doubt and assuming that she would soon return with a perfectly reasonable explanation for her temporary absence. It was in this moment of indecision and growing anxiety that Brian's gaze was caught by Melissa's personal tablet that was casually lying on the arm of the chair next to the sofa. Something completely inexplicable and totally out of his usual character pushed Brian to pick up the electronic device of his wife, an action that completely violated the principles of mutual respect and trust that had guided their marriage for 15 years of apparently solid and transparent relationship. Throughout his entire married life, Brian had never even considered the possibility of checking Melissa's personal communications, respecting completely her individual space and privacy, never showing any possessive, controlling or intrusive behavior that could characterize sickly jealousy or marital distrust. Brian had always firmly believed that healthy and lasting relationships were based on absolute trust and unconditional mutual respect, principles that he had followed religiously throughout his marriage, proud of never having succumbed to the paranoia that tormented many of his friends and colleagues at work. However, in that specific and inexplicable moment, a strange and irresistible force took over him completely, as if his subconscious was detecting subtle alarm signals that his conscious mind had not yet processed or understood properly. Melissa's tablet was not protected by a password or any type of security lock, an additional demonstration of the mutual trust that had always characterized their relationship, and immediately the messaging application opened automatically on the screen, revealing an active conversation that instantly froze Brian's blood and made his heart race uncontrollably. The conversation displayed on the screen was between Melissa and someone identified in the contact system simply as Patrick, a name that Brian did not recognize from any social, professional or family context of his wife. The messages were extremely recent, all dated that same night, and the content was absolutely devastating for any husband who discovered such a secret communication between his wife and another man. Brian read with increasing horror, disbelief and emotional devastation the words that destroyed 15 years of absolute trust in a matter of terrifying seconds. Melissa had written around 9:30 that night, approximately 30 minutes before sending the innocent goodnight message to Brian. "My husband just called me from the office, said he will work the whole night homologating a system and will only come home tomorrow morning very late. We can meet tonight without any risk of being discovered or caught." Patrick had responded almost immediately with an enthusiasm that clearly revealed the naturalness and frequency of these secret meetings. "Perfect, my love. Same place as always then. I'm crazy with missing you since our last meeting." Melissa confirmed with a message that cut Brian's heart like a sharp blade. "Yes, I'm finishing getting ready here and will leave in 15 minutes. I also miss you very much and can't wait to be in your arms again." The conversation continued with intimate details and specific references to previous meetings that left absolutely clear and undeniable that this was not the first time that his wife had betrayed him in such a calculated, premeditated and systematic way, taking advantage specifically of his prolonged absences due to professional reasons. Brian read and reread the incriminating messages several times consecutively, feeling as if the ground had literally disappeared under his feet and his entire known and reliable world had completely collapsed in a matter of terrifying minutes. 15 years of apparently happy and harmonious marriage, 15 years of absolute and unshakable trust in his wife, 15 years defending passionately the integrity and fidelity of Melissa in front of skeptical friends and suspicious colleagues. Everything had been revealed as a cruel and elaborate illusion that was being destroyed before his eyes through the cold screen of a tablet. His hands trembled uncontrollably due to the devastating emotional shock while he desperately tried to understand the full magnitude of the betrayal he had discovered in such an unexpected and brutal way. With extreme difficulty in maintaining motor coordination due to the psychological trauma he was experiencing, Brian managed to take several detailed photos of the entire compromising conversation with his own smartphone, creating irrefutable photographic evidence of an infidelity that he never imagined he would need to document against the woman he loved unconditionally and trusted more than anyone else in the universe. The digital clock on the television set in the room marked almost midnight and Melissa had still not returned from her secret extramarital meeting, a fact that now made complete and painful sense for Brian, who finally understood the real reason for his wife's inexplicable absence. Brian remained seated on the same sofa in the living room for more than 3 consecutive hours, completely motionless like a marble statue, slowly processing the emotional devastation that had hit him with the destructive force of a tsunami. He didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't break any objects in a fit of rage, just remained in a deep and paralyzing state of shock, staring blankly at the emptiness of the dark room while his mind desperately tried to process and understand how the woman he had completely trusted had managed to build and maintain such an elaborate, convincing and systematic double life during a period he could not even estimate precisely. Contradictory, painful and tormenting thoughts succeeded each other in his mind like violent waves. How many other times had this betrayal happened without him suspecting? Exactly how long had this systematic infidelity lasted? How many lies had he believed blindly? How many intimate and special moments between them had been just a convincing theatrical performance from Melissa? How many declarations of love had been false? Around 3 in the morning, when he finally managed to gather enough emotional and psychological strength to take some concrete and decisive action, Brian typed a direct and objective message to Melissa, without any circumlocutions, subtleties, or unnecessary diplomacy. I came home earlier from work around 11 o'clock due to technical problems. I've been here since then waiting for you to come back home. Where exactly are you right now? By the way, I accidentally saw the messages you exchanged with Patrick on your tablet that was here in the living room." A few minutes after sending the revealing message, enough time for Brian to imagine Melissa checking her private conversations and realizing with horror that she had been caught in the act, Brian's phone rang with the call he knew inevitably he would receive. It was Melissa calling in panic, and her voice showed evident desperation and nervousness that completely confirmed her guilt when she said only, with her breath clearly altered by anxiety and fear, "I'm coming home now, please wait up because we need to urgently talk about this." When Melissa finally arrived home about 20 minutes later, clearly driving at excessive speed due to desperation, Brian remained seated exactly in the same place where he had spent the last agonizing hours, watching carefully every detail while she entered through the front door trying to maintain some composure and normality that she could no longer convincingly sustain. She was visibly nervous and agitated, with slightly disheveled hair, makeup smudged revealing signs of crying or sweat, and an expression of panic barely controlled in her eyes that she desperately tried to hide without any success. Her clothes also seemed to have been hastily put on, with some details out of place that Brian, with his sharpened attention due to the situation, could clearly notice for the first time in 15 years of intimate cohabitation. Immediately, before Brian even spoke a word or asked any question, Melissa began to fabricate an elaborate and detailed explanation, speaking rapidly and in a jumbled manner as if she had mentally rehearsed during the desperate trip back home. With a suspicious fluency that revealed prior preparation, she said that she had left at the last minute and without warning to help a very close and dear friend who was going through an extremely serious emotional crisis and needed urgent company, moral support and psychological assistance during the night. Regarding the compromising and incriminating messages with Patrick that Brian had discovered on her tablet, Melissa claimed with apparent conviction but little convincing that it was just a casual acquaintance from the internet, someone with whom she maintained occasional and completely innocent conversations through social networks and messaging apps. She insisted vehemently that the phrases that Brian had interpreted as clear and undeniable evidence of marital infidelity were just virtual jokes without any real, romantic or sexual meaning, misunderstandings caused by the inherently ambiguous nature of modern digital communication. She solemnly swore, looking directly into Brian's eyes with intensity that intended to be convincing, that she had never met Patrick in person in any circumstance, that she did not even know what he looked like physically, his profession or where he lived, and that all interactions between them were strictly limited to casual online conversations about completely trivial, irrelevant and non-romantic or sexual topics. Brian listened patiently to the elaborate explanation fabricated by his wife, observing meticulously every detail of her desperate performance, each revealing micro-facial expression, each unconscious hesitation in her speech, each carefully chosen word to sound convincing and plausible for a husband that she hoped would still trust her word. After 15 years of intimate and daily cohabitation, Brian knew perfectly all of Melissa's characteristic mannerisms, her genuine expressions versus her unsuccessful attempts at dissimulation, her natural behavior patterns when she was being completely honest versus when she was building elaborate and desperate lies to save herself from compromising situations. After listening patiently to the defensive speech and all the desperate justifications, Brian responded with a supernatural calm that he himself did not know where he was drawing from at that moment of unprecedented emotional crisis. "Melissa, our marriage ended today, right now, in this midnight. This conversation we're having now is the official and definitive end of 15 years of shared life." The sentence was spoken without any external display of anger, without hysterical shouts or excessive drama, just as an inevitable and definitive confirmation of a fact that admitted no possibility of negotiation, discussion or reversal. Melissa's reaction was immediate, desperate and completely revealing of her guilt. She entered complete emotional despair, crying copiously with tears that seemed genuine but came too late, repeatedly claiming that Brian was completely misunderstanding and unjustly interpreting the entire situation. She implored for an opportunity to clarify all points, promised total transparency and swore to do anything to regain the lost trust. Brian then asked a simple question: "Exactly which friend did you go to help?" Melissa hesitated before answering, "Sophia, from my work." Brian took the phone. Then let's call Sophia now and confirm your version. Melissa tried to stop him, but Brian was already dialing when she finally gave in. Okay, I confess everything. Between abundant tears and convulsive sobs, Melissa finally admitted the devastating truth that she had hidden for so long. She revealed that she had been secretly meeting with Patrick for exactly 6 months, always carefully planning these meetings to coincide with the periods when Brian worked late. She confessed that she used a second hidden phone to communicate with him, that she had created elaborate excuses about non-existent commitments with friends to justify her nighttime absences. Between painful confessions, Melissa begged for forgiveness with an intense desperation that Brian had never seen before, promising to end any contact with Patrick immediately, to undergo individual and couple therapy if necessary, to completely change her behavior to regain the lost trust. She swore that she loved Brian more than anyone in the world, that Patrick had been just a temporary distraction during a moment of emotional vulnerability. She even got down on her knees in front of Brian, holding his hands with desperate strength and begging for a second chance. Brian observed all that display of repentance with a mixture of residual compassion and unwavering determination, understanding that some boundaries, once crossed, do not admit a return. After hearing all the emotional confession, he responded with controlled calm, "Melissa, I understand that you are sorry and that your feelings of guilt are real. However, trust, once broken in this calculated way, can never be restored. It's not just about Patrick, but about your ability to build elaborate lies for months, to look into my eyes every day pretending nothing was happening. Our story was real for 15 years, but it ended this midnight." The divorce process was initiated the following Monday. Brian hired a lawyer and presented all the photographic evidence of the infidelity. The evidence guaranteed a favorable division of assets, with Brian staying in the house and Melissa moving in with her parents. She complied with all the determinations without resistance, showing complete cooperation motivated by guilt. In the following months, Brian fully immersed himself in his career, channeling his emotional energy into exceptional productivity. His dedication was recognized with a promotion to Director of Information Technology, doubling his salary and giving him authority over a team of 15 professionals. 3 years after the divorce, Brian had established himself as one of the most respected professionals in his field, evaluating million-dollar proposals and selecting solutions for complex projects. During this period, he completely rebuilt his emotional life, developing new stimulating hobbies such as photography and cooking, strengthening old friendships that had been neglected during the marriage, and even occasionally venturing into casual encounters that helped him regain his trust in interpersonal relationships. His new strategic position placed him in direct contact with major technology providers and specialized service companies, being recognized in the industry as a reliable and extremely competent expert. On a morning in March, Brian was conducting strategic meetings with competing companies vying for a $50 million contract for complete technological modernization of a client's company. The third company sent a team of 6 professionals led by a manager who introduced himself formally as Patrick Trenton. Brian felt an electric shiver run down his spine upon hearing that unmistakable name, discreetly checked on his smartphone the old evidence of the infidelity that he had never managed to completely delete. It was exactly the same person who had destroyed his marriage. After confirming definitively the identity through casual questions about personal email, Brian looked directly into Patrick's eyes and said with firm and controlled voice, "Mr. Trenton, exactly 3 years ago I divorced because I found out my wife was having an extramarital affair with you. I have all the photographic evidence stored on my phone. I won't do business with someone who has shown lack of character and personal integrity. Please leave the room immediately." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. The team of Patrick was visibly uncomfortable, and the meeting ended abruptly without any possibility of recovery. Weeks later, Brian learned that Patrick had been summarily fired from the supplier company, and he firmly refused any future partnership with that organization. That night, when he arrived home, Brian served himself a glass of the best wine he kept for special occasions, sat in his favorite armchair and smiled with a feeling of complete justice, finally understanding that the pain of betrayal had definitively transformed into wisdom, personal strength and unbreakable dignity. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.